So, first off, thanks Eddie and with Black Diamond stuff. People probably noticed my face. I took a fall the other day while climbing, and it wasn't a Black Diamond cam. It's actually Metolius. So I was like,
Gratitude.
so maybe Roger, you can hook me up with a cam. Thanks to you, but I did fall, and the number 4 PE nut did hold. So good fall. Not sponsored, but I like this slide because this meme was like pretty viral, and literally my in-laws were just at my house watching my kid, and they still think that's what I do in the upper left, even though I've been guiding now for over 20 years. They think I take people hiking in the woods. So, and social media thinks that's what you do, and gosh, we all want to do that, but this is the reality, like Ian and Mark kind of talked about. So, I know Eddie asked me to kind of talk a little bit about like my career and where I ended up, and my role, and if you don't know, but I'm the director at Alpine Ascents, which is a 7 summits guide service here in Seattle now. But it's going to kind of start with walking you through like kind of how I ended up there, and some things maybe that worked out well for me, and what I see in the industry as some trends out there. Let's see if this works. It's not working. Well, so I actually started, I grew up here in Washington. I went to college in Colorado. It took me 5 years to get a degree in recreation. So it's a lot. And my college professor happened to be friends with the head climbing ranger at Mount Rainier, Mike Gauthier. And I got a job as a climbing ranger as my seasonal job when I was, 19 years old. So before I could drink alcohol, I was a climbing ranger, and they used to hire college kids because they could pay them through a different fund. They don't do that anymore, but that was my first job. This photo was taken with the Chinook, and I was there. And this is when there's a really bad accident that RMI happened. This is in 2002, I think, 2001. So then I did a climbing ranger job for 2 years, and I really didn't like rescuing people, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to guide. So I was like, let's try this. And I grew up in Bellingham. My parents lived there, and I always wanted to work for the American Alpine Institute. So I got hired. I got to guide high ratio, 5 to 1 by myself right away. It was awesome. I got to work with Mark Allen. But Mark and I were there together. I got to guide the West Ridge of Forbidden. There's only 3 in that photo, but there's actually a 4th climber that day by myself. So it was an awesome experience. I looked like this. Probably wouldn't make it to the Swiss Association, but I had a really awesome, fun life growing up. It was cool. I think I got $5 more a day when I guided Forbidden Peak for 4 to 1. When I went to the guide program, we didn't have smartphones, so we were out there having to use the map and compass and measuring it all and make it all work. And I'm really glad I went through during that time period to know how to use all these skills versus just finding the blue dot.
Love the string being used to measure distance.
Yeah. In the winter, I was trying to be a ski bum in Salt Lake. I started ski guiding a bunch, and my career kind of just like, I had a bunch of random things that happened. I happened to be ski guiding one day, and another ski guide who I knew blew out his ACL, and the next day they needed somebody young who's motivated, and I happened to be there, and I got to go heli skiing the next day. I had no experience around a helicopter, and I think I was 24 years old. And it just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And things kind of worked out for me. I was like really young and motivated, and I got to go on expeditions for Alpine Ascents. It's like on all long, and started guiding a bunch of big trips around the world at a pretty young age. And I loved it. I traveled a bunch. I even started my own guide service for a bit. I became an IFMGA guide in 2009. And in 2010, my wife and I, our girlfriend at the time, we were living in Salt Lake, and I started my own business called Snow, Rock, and Ice Adventures. And I tried to run my own guide service. I even obtained a Wasatch permit then, and I thought it was like really challenging. I could not figure it out for the life of me. I definitely did not do my taxes correctly. You should not tell anybody that. And I could not figure out how to take the money in, how to do it, how to do all that stuff, how to make it all work. And I had 2 major issues when I was guiding and running my own business. I could not uphold a cancellation policy. I had a client cancel on an Alps trilogy trip about 3 weeks prior. And I was just like, oh my gosh, and I didn't collect the money yet. And I was like, fine, we're gonna be fine, Rachel. We just bought a house and we're gonna be okay. And then that fall, I had another client who canceled last minute on a Ecuador ski trip. And he owed me about $10,000 and he tore his ACL. And I didn't have a cancellation policy. So after that, I was like, I can't do this. So I pretty much started running all of my private trips back through Alpine Ascents. This is in like 2014, 2015, because I felt couldn't be the mean person, but now I kind of am. So but I couldn't do that. I just was like, I built these relationships with these clients and I just didn't feel comfortable being like, hey, you canceled. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't really have any clue, you know? So then I started running all my trips back through Alpine Ascents, and it worked out better for me because at the end of the day, I knew they would collect the money and I would get paid. And it was up to that client. If they canceled, they could take the cancellation policy. So that's the avenue I went down, and it worked. I don't know. And I'm not here to sell people on one or the other, but that's kind of the path I went down. So I don't know if I want to go through that. And then I kind of want to talk a little about like, so what is mountain guiding? You know, I've been doing this for a bit now. A little bit also about my job. I also sit on an advisory board for a thing is called the National Outdoor ORR, the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. It's a huge nonprofit, and so I go to DC like once a year to talk about the for-profit guiding sector in the United States. So last year I did a little bit of a talk when I went there about you know, what is a mountain guide and why are we important? Why are we getting hired? So I'll kind of go through a couple of those slides here. But this is kind of what I share with them is like, we're risk managers. We're operating, you know, in a complex, inherently hazardous environment. Our clients rely on us to create meaningful experiences. Like, you know, Ian and Martin talked about this, Aaron, you know, but they're pretty much paying us to manage their risk. But why do people hire us? Why do people pay a lot of money? It's pretty much because they can't do it on their own, right? And so they're hiring you for your good judgment. It's pretty simple out there, you know, for you to make the good judgments out there as a guide. That's kind of what we're doing, and to also provide that experience along the way. I think some key things to being a mountain guide is you got to be comfortable in discomfort out there. And if you're not into it kind of being harsh, then it might not be the profession for you, unfortunately. This is, you know, we got some staff here. One of you guys probably took this photo. This is on Rainier. No. Let's see, this is photo, it's video. That works. It's from Rainier, so you got to be pretty comfortable being uncomfortable out there and used to it, because, you know, I mean, it's not always sunny, you know, and even in Switzerland, I know it's utopia, Martin, but so you gotta be ready about it. So a little bit about like the large guide service perspective. That's what Eddie wanted me to talk about. So there's several large guide services here in Washington, and all over. You know, we deal with scale and complexity out there. It's actually quite interesting, and I never thought I would end up where I am in my life. But it's pretty cool actually when you think about what we deal with. We deal with like large scale risk management, large scale volume. So there's many moving parts to make it work. Alpine Ascents, I'll talk a little about the business itself, but we have 14 salaried admin staff just to run the guide service itself that are full-time year-round employees. And we employ over 100 guides around the world. And we'll talk a little about that, but you have to clear systems for communication and collaboration. Yet, you know, it relies on volume. The moment the volume falls out, the moment a large guide service falls out. So that's the reality. Just like if Amazon, if they stopped having a website that works, the volume's not there, the company's not there. So it's the same concept. So it's all about volume. Administrative, you have to have a huge, robust staff, and most guide services, I think, that are doing really well don't employ guides. They employ people who have administrative background. At Alpine, I'm the only person who comes from a mountain climbing background. Everybody else has a degree, not in recreation. They have like business degrees or writing degrees. Some people are in creative arts, you know, and I think it really helps out. That's what I see there. You know, you have a gear store, marketing, permitting, logistics, lawyers, accounting staff. a huge guide staff, and hundreds of to thousands of clients annually a year. To give you an idea, Alpine, we run just over 4,000 people annually a year through the business. So one thing about the guides is that trend that we're seeing, and we'll talk a little bit more about industry trends, but I wanted to mention this, Martin was kind of talking about the days, is in around 2017 to 2019, we would only employ around 60 guides in the state of Washington to run around 2,000 clients. And this year, we're employing just under 100 to run the same amount of clients because more and more people are working less. And we're seeing that trend. And I think it's actually great. A guide who works part-time as a nurse, part-time mountain guide, she does a phenomenal job. And they have to have that subsidiary income to make it work here in Washington or anywhere in the United States. And I've talked with many other large guide services, and everybody's seen the same trend, where guides are working part-time in one trade and part-time in guiding. We have to deal with a large guide service, global logistics. This is in Antarctica, and Dawn spent a bunch of time there. But literally just the other week, we had a huge mess in New Guinea with a helicopter operation for our Parsons expedition. And you got to deal with this stuff all the time. And it's never ending if you're part of a large guide service. There's unique logistics dealing with different languages. Luckily now there's like AI and ChatGPT and all these things that'll translate it. But when I started, there wasn't that stuff. So kind of just figuring it out. Local partnerships and constantly adapting to things out there. I was dealing with people yelling at me the other day. We're stuck in Tamika because a helicopter flight wasn't happening. It's like, it is what it is. Yeah, oh, muffin. Seasonality is huge for guide services. We're, like large scale services, whether it's Alpine or RMI or even Colorado Mountain School, Jacksonville Mountain Guides. Even the AMGA I consider them a guide service. They're employing guides to teach. Demands are huge, and then big seasonality in there. So you have to adjust that with your staffing scale and how you run the business. And strategic diversification. So one thing that at Alpine we do is we got into Martin wanted to kill me over this when I got into it in the avalanche industry business. So we dabbled in that, but really for us it's still sticking to the 7 Summit core and creating that. One thing is large scale risk management. It's really hard when you have on a busy day in June, July, and August, we might have about 60 to 70 guides in the field given day. So dealing with the large scale risk management globally of how we're managing that all. So you have to have a robust risk management plan, and you have to have really strict SOPs. And so one thing I feel like at a large scale guide services, they tend to take less risk because of the scale of the company. Independent guiding, when I was doing that, I would take a bigger risk than when I'm working for a large company. There because of the scale of all these things. Single incidents have a broader impact for a large company. You've got more to lose if there was a big accident than if you were an individual, actually. More things that could happen. You could lose your concession. A huge accident. Client experience is really hard to track at a large guide service. When I was, ran my own company or was doing just a lot of private guiding through Alpine Ascents, I could literally have more one-on-one interactions with the clients. It's really hard to do that when you're dealing with volume. And so you have to get creative with how you're going to create that, that experience so it doesn't feel like they're just going through a Walmart style business there. Invest in communication and quality so that way your brand stays loyal and people come back. So we'll talk a little bit about some industry trends out there. One of the largest trends that we've, the guiding industry has seen is the globalization and competitive nature out there. So historically, maybe if we look back a decade ago, almost every Western climber was going with a Western guide service on an international trip. And these days, it's down to around 20%. More and more people are willing to travel and go with a local guide service, which is awesome. It provides that local guide service with work, that local guide train, all that experience, but less people are booking large-scale Western-based guide services to go to places like Nepal. We have to compete with NIMS, 14 Peaks. Imagine Nepal, all these companies that 10 years ago didn't exist. And that's becoming more and more challenging. Globalization, it's creating the world that's becoming closer together. People never would go to Kilimanjaro with a local guide service, and now that it's very common. So these are all the challenges that the large-scale guide services are seeing. It's not like the bread and butter that Ben Marquardt believes we're making on the That's how I got to China. The other thing that goes on all the time is overload and misconception. I think the internet and social media is doing a disservice to our clients. There's so many times people like they see these things and they're like, oh, climbing Rainier wasn't that hard. I read this blog. And then the reality is it's actually really hard. Okay? And people, I think, have a higher expectation than they used to maybe 15 years ago. They're expecting the summit or they're expecting this high quality service. Other trends, this one, climate change. This is on Rainier, a ladder connecting snow, two pieces of permanent snow with a ladder and making it work there. This is actually in June, 2 years ago on Rainier. You know, and then the rise of the summit-oriented client. I think, you know, when I was guiding a lot, it didn't seem people were that focused, and now it's like if somebody doesn't summit, they complain. It's very different than it was. All right, but climate change and the environmental instability is going to be something that's going to really affect us here in Washington in the next 10 to 15 years. So I think having a plan, understanding that, thinking forward about how you plan to diversify your guiding, so that way you're not behind the curve when this happens. It already is, you know. I wasn't sure who we were talking to tonight, but I was going to throw this out here. Is keys for applying to a guide service. So this probably doesn't apply to most people, but I get Alpine. We get about 80 to 100 applicants a year. Most people haven't been guiding, but it's amazing. Do your homework. Make sure you know who you're talking to. Know your audience. Ask the paperwork. Get the names correct. Somebody today literally emailed applying and talked. If you know Mary, she's our guide manager. Called her Molly. And then last week, somebody spelled her name M-E-R-R-Y, like Merry Christmas. Not very professional. So if you're applying for a job, make sure you know who you're talking to. Build a strong resume. Set yourself up for success. Be professional. A couple years ago, I was doing some interviews and somebody was skinny. And while that's cool, they're out back if you're skiing, I couldn't hear them. So it's just like, no, I'm not going to hire this guy. I don't care if they're a certified guide or not. You know,
They're skinny during the interview.
Yeah,
it's
like-
like do.
yeah, it's like, it's like you're wasting my time. You know, it's like, no, I don't care. So, the last thing is people ask me like, what are the top 10 things you look for in a guide? And you know, being a certified guide is going to be one of them, obviously. But there's so many other people and guides that work at Alpine or other places around the world that are not certified. There are phenomenal mountain guides around the world. I know, you know, so these are things that I think. There's no research or graphs about this, but that I think really help set people up for a strong career. Be empathetic and supportive. You got to be empathetic to your clients out there. If they can't summit, whether it's due to their ability or the weather, just understand they spent thousands of dollars and tons of time to get there. So help them out. Find that common ground with them. To work at a large scale guide service, you got to be a team player, and you got to work well with others. And you know, you're going to work with a ton of different people, tons of clients, maybe the national park, maybe the Forest Service, maybe other guide services. So you got to get along. Have a diverse climbing background. Clients love to talk to you about your favorite people. They love asking you like, what was your favorite climb, Jonathan? Or what was this? So having a diverse background and being able to share that helps make you kind of more marketable and bridges that gap with them. Leadership with humility. Okay. So I think you know, a lot of people want to know who the lead guide is or be in charge, but being a good leader is also being humble and knowing when to step back and to kind of let things unfold, take the back seat. Adaptability is key. So being willing to adjust on the fly, reading the conditions, adapting to mountain changing conditions, or to your clients. Those of you who work at Alpine probably have heard me talk about the 5-minute rule, but it's a strong work ethic. So if you do something and you think the task is done, take 5 more minutes and get the task done right. So I worked at a heli ski lodge for a decade, and that was pretty much ingrained into me. So when a guy tells me, yep, the tents are all anchored, I'm like, did you take 5 more minutes? They're like, nope. I go over there, tents aren't anchored, right? So take 5 more minutes every time, and you'll have very good, strong work ethic to anything you do out there. So pretty much any job I do, whether it's like writing a permit, emailing a client, doing this presentation, I do it, and then I spend 5 more minutes on it and giving it a polished finish. You don't have to set yourself up for success. Fitness and movement. I think this is really important out there. So you gotta be fit, and you gotta be able to move in the environment that you're out. It'll be inspiring to your clients. And this is the last 3. AMGA training can be continuing at, whether you go all the way down the track of being a certified guide, or go another road and do some like, rescue courses, but continue to challenge yourself, the technical systems out there, and to continue to learn. Go to ISSWs, NSOF, things like that. Be professional. So one of the top things I hear about from these clients is when the guides aren't professional out there. So get to know your client's name, get to know who they are. If you're not going to summit, spend time getting to know them. Ask them questions. Ask them questions about their life. Why'd you pick this mountain? How'd you end up here? They want to talk to you and they want to share that experience with you and get to know them. And remember, the tents aren't soundproof. Okay? And the number one thing, that this is what I think is probably the most important thing for a mountain guide, is having good sound judgment out there. Knowing when to make the decision to keep going, when to turn around, when to adjust the plan. And so I think having a really good level head sound judgment and thinking of things very objective based and not based on emotion will set you up for success. So the last thing, like Ian mentioned, is I've got a wife and a kid. My kid loves climbing, and one of the best things I think about guiding is my family gets to travel with me. And I'm very fortunate that when I do go out, my family gets to travel with me and they enjoy it. So that's all I've got.